Why having many friends won't make you happier. Alright, imagine this: we live in a world where having a large social circle is often seen as a sign of success. Social media encourages us to connect with as many people as possible, and society has conditioned us to believe that the more friends we have, the happier we'll be. But let's pause for a second and ask ourselves a much deeper question: is that really true? Today, we're going to dive into why having many friends won't make you happier. This is going to challenge everything you've been told about social connections, and by the end of it, you might just rethink your entire approach to friendship. Let's start by looking at something fundamental. Friendship, at its core, is supposed to bring us joy, comfort, and a sense of belonging, right? But here's the paradox: can an abundance of connections dilute the very essence of friendship? You see, the more friends you have, the harder it is to maintain deep, meaningful relationships with each one of them. We only have so much emotional energy to give. Think about it: when you spread that energy across dozens or even hundreds of people, how deep can any of those connections really be? Let's take a moment to reflect on this. Is it better to have a few friends who truly understand you, or many friends who barely scratch the surface? In striving for quantity, we often sacrifice quality, and this is where the illusion of happiness through popularity falls apart. You might have a lot of friends, but how many of them really know you? How many of them would be there for you in your darkest hour? We're conditioned to believe that more is always better. But what if more friends actually leads to more superficial relationships? It's like trying to juggle 20 balls at once. Sure, you're interacting with all of them, but none of them are getting your full attention. And here's the deeper issue: do we mistake visibility for value? Just because you're surrounded by people doesn't mean you're truly connected to them. Let's explore this a little further. Have you ever noticed how exhausting it can be to keep up with a large group of acquaintances? The constant small talk, the shallow interactions, it's draining. And yet, we keep doing it because we think that's what we're supposed to do. But here's the philosophical insight: isn't true happiness found in depth, not breadth? The deeper the connection, the more fulfilling the relationship. And depth requires time, effort, and emotional investment, things that are difficult to offer when you're trying to maintain a vast social network.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
Now, let's consider the psychology behind this. Studies have shown that maintaining a large social circle can actually lead to higher levels of stress and anxiety. Why? Because with more friends comes more expectations. You have to keep up with everyone's lives, attend more social events, and deal with the inevitable conflicts that come with any relationship. It becomes overwhelming, and instead of bringing joy, these connections start to feel like obligations. So, here's a question for you to ponder: are we sacrificing our peace of mind in the pursuit of social validation? Another fascinating aspect of this is the role that social media plays in amplifying the myth that having more friends equals more happiness. Platforms like Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter make it easy to accumulate hundreds or even thousands of friends or followers. But here's the thing: are these digital connections really friendships? Just because someone likes your post or comments on your picture doesn't mean they're a true friend. It might give you a temporary sense of validation, but does it provide the deep emotional connection that true friendship offers? So, let's ask a deeper question: are we mistaking social interaction for social connection? There's a big difference between the two. Interaction is surface level: it's the likes, the comments, the occasional message. A connection, on the other hand, is about understanding, trust, and vulnerability. And here's the hard truth: you simply can't have that kind of connection with hundreds of people. It's not possible, because real connection takes time and effort, here's where things get really interesting. The philosopher Aristotle once said that true friendship is rare because it's based on virtue and deep mutual understanding. He argued that most of our relationships are either for pleasure or utility, friends we hang out with for fun, or friends we keep around because they offer us some kind of benefit. But true friendship, the kind that enriches our lives, is based on shared values, mutual respect, and a deep emotional bond. So, here's a profound question to reflect on. Are we filling our lives with friends of utility and pleasure, while neglecting the pursuit of true, virtuous friendships? The illusion of connection. Are we mistaking visibility for intimacy? All right, let's continue this exploration into why having many friends won't make you happier by diving deeper into the nature of true connection, and why excess social ties might actually leave us feeling lonelier. Think about this. In today's society, we often confuse visibility with intimacy. Social media has amplified this illusion. We see people with hundreds or even thousands of connections, followers, or friends, and we're led to believe that these people must be thriving socially. But here's the catch: does more attention really equate to more connection? The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once famously said, "Hell is other people." What he meant wasn't that people are inherently bad, but that when we're constantly aware of how others perceive us, we can lose ourselves in the process. When you have many friends, especially in the age of social media, you're often performing for an audience rather than connecting authentically. You're managing expectations, curating an image, and maintaining surface-level conversations. This leads to a fundamental philosophical dilemma. Are we more concerned with being liked by many or truly known by a few? Now, let's consider how this affects our sense of self. When you have a large social circle, it becomes easy to lose touch with who you really are. You start adapting yourself to fit into different social groups, constantly shifting your personality depending on who you're with. This can lead to a kind of existential fragmentation where you're surrounded by people, but you don't feel truly understood by anyone. So, here's the question: what's more important, being seen by many or being understood by a select few? There's also a psychological component at play here. Research shows that having too many social connections can make it harder to form deep, meaningful bonds. This is because true friendship requires vulnerability, trust, and time, things that are difficult to cultivate when you're juggling a large number of relationships. It's like spreading yourself too thin emotionally. You end up with lots of acquaintances, but few true friends. And here's a profound question to consider: are we sacrificing depth in relationships for the illusion of social abundance? Let's not forget the emotional toll. More friends often mean more social obligations, more expectations, and more potential for conflict. Think about the emotional bandwidth required to keep up with a large group of people. It's exhausting, and over time it can lead to burnout. So instead of feeling more connected, you might actually feel more drained. In the end, the pursuit of many friends can sometimes leave us feeling more isolated than connected. The deeper wisdom here is that happiness doesn't come from the number of people who know you, it comes from the depth of the relationships you cultivate. So here's a final question: if happiness is found in deep connection, why are we so obsessed with expanding our social circles rather than deepening them? The paradox of choice: why more friends means less fulfillment. Let's now turn to a paradox that's central to this entire conversation: the paradox of choice. In modern life, we've been conditioned to believe that more options will always lead to more satisfaction. More friends, more opportunities, more connections, these are supposed to make us feel more fulfilled, right? But the reality is far more complex. The more friends we have, the more we're forced to make choices about how to spend our time and emotional energy. And paradoxically, having more choices often leads to less satisfaction. not more. This idea is supported by psychologist Barry Schwartz, who coined the term the paradox of choice. He argued that having too many options can lead to anxiety, indecision, and regret. Now, let's apply this to our relationships. When you have a vast social circle, your attention is constantly divided. You're pulled in multiple directions, trying to keep up with everyone. And here's where the paradox kicks in: the more friends you have, the less deeply you can connect with any single person. So instead of feeling enriched by your many relationships, you may feel stretched thin, struggling to maintain even the most basic emotional bonds. Let's dig deeper into the emotional consequences of this. When you have fewer friends, you can invest more time, energy, and care in each relationship. You're able to nurture those bonds, allowing them to grow into something meaningful. But when you're constantly trying to juggle a multitude of friendships, it becomes harder to give any one person the attention they deserve. And here's the philosophical question: can a relationship that lacks depth truly be called a friendship? Think about it like this: imagine you're at a buffet with dozens of different dishes. You can sample a little bit of everything, but you never get the chance to really savor any one dish. That's what it's like when you have too many friends. You're constantly sampling small pieces of each relationship, but you never get to fully enjoy the richness of a deep, meaningful connection. And here's the kicker: does having more friends actually create more loneliness? It seems counterintuitive, but the research supports it. Studies have shown that people with large social networks often feel lonelier than those with smaller, more intimate circles. Why? Because even though they're surrounded by people, they lack the deep emotional connections that truly combat loneliness. The result is a kind of crowded isolation where you're never alone but still feel emotionally disconnected. Here's another layer to this paradox: the more friends you have, the more likely you are to experience social comparison. You start comparing yourself to your friends, measuring your success, happiness, or attractiveness against theirs. And social media only amplifies this. When you're connected to hundreds of people online, you're constantly bombarded with their curated lives, their highlight reels. This comparison can lead to feelings of inadequacy, insecurity, and even jealousy. So, here's a deep question to consider: are we using our friendships to validate ourselves rather than to find genuine connection? As we continue, it's important to recognize that not all friendships are equal. Some will bring you joy, others will drain your energy. But when you have too many friends, it becomes difficult to discern which relationships are truly enriching and which are superficial. This is where the paradox of choice hits hardest. More friends means more decisions, more complexity, and ultimately, more dissatisfaction. In the end, having more friends often means having more surface-level relationships, which can leave us feeling empty. The deeper wisdom here is that meaningful connection requires time, presence, and emotional investment, things that are impossible to spread across a vast social network. Now, let's move forward and explore how this affects our understanding of happiness itself. The true path to happiness: depth over quantity in friendship. Now that we've explored the paradox of choice and the illusion of connection, we arrive at the most important question of all: what actually makes us happy in our relationships? If having more friends doesn't bring us happiness, then what does? The answer lies in the depth of our connections, not the number of them. Let's reflect on a fundamental truth: human beings are wired for deep, meaningful connections. From a psychological perspective, we don't need hundreds of friends to feel fulfilled. Instead, we need a few genuine relationships where we can be vulnerable, where we can trust, and where we feel understood. This is why Aristotle, one of the greatest philosophers in history, emphasized the rarity of true friendship. He argued that most relationships serve a purpose, pleasure, or utility, but true friendship is based on mutual virtue, respect, and the desire to see each other thrive. Here's a deep question to consider: what kind of friendships do you truly want in your life? Are you seeking friendships based on shared values, where you both grow and support each other? Or are you accumulating friends for the sake of appearances, social status, or convenience? The friendships that will truly make you happy are the ones where you can be your authentic self, without judgment or pretense. And here's where we can tie everything together. Happiness in relationships doesn't come from popularity, but from intimacy. When we focus on having fewer, but deeper, friendships, we allow ourselves the time and emotional space to truly connect. We can invest in those relationships, nurture them, and watch them grow into something profoundly meaningful. Think about the joy that comes from knowing someone understands you completely, or the relief of having someone you can truly confide in during tough times. This is the essence of what brings long-lasting happiness. But to get there, we must first let go of the idea that more friends equals more happiness. This is a difficult shift because society, especially in the age of social media, tells us the opposite. We're bombarded with images of people surrounded by large groups of friends, attending parties, and living seemingly perfect social lives. But here's the truth: happiness isn't found in the number of people we know, it's found in the quality of the connections we keep. The practical wisdom here is simple but profound: focus on cultivating a few close friendships that enrich your life. Start by asking yourself, which relationships in my life bring me joy, peace, and understanding? Once you identify those, invest in them deeply. Be present, be vulnerable, and most importantly, be intentional. Friendships, like anything else worth having, require effort and care. The more you nurture these relationships, the more they will nurture you in return. Here's an interesting insight: true happiness in friendships comes not from what you get, but from what you give. When you focus on being a good friend, someone who listens, supports, and shows up, you naturally attract the same energy back. And this reciprocity builds the kind of bond that can weather life's inevitable storms. In contrast, superficial friendships often crumble under pressure, leaving you feeling even more isolated when you need support the most. Finally, let's touch on the importance of solitude. Having fewer, deeper friendships allows you the space to also be alone without feeling lonely. Solitude, when balanced with meaningful relationships, gives you time to reflect, recharge, and grow as an individual. And here's the final question to ponder: could solitude, alongside deep friendships, be the key to true happiness in our social lives? In the end, happiness doesn't come from how many people we surround ourselves with, but from how deeply we connect with the people who truly matter. So, as you move forward, remember, it's not about having many friends, it's about having the right ones.